You're listening to Imperfect Heroes, Insights into Parenting, the perfect podcast for imperfect parents looking to find joy in their experience of raising children in an imperfect world. And I'm your host, DJ Stutz. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for choosing to spend the next few minutes here with us at Imperfect Heroes, Insights into Parenting. And today I have my good friend. She's been a guest several times on the show. I love having her here. That's why I have her back, Lenora Edwards. Yay!
It's so good to be with you again, DJ, and I love coming to celebrate with you and to have our awesome conversations that we do.
Oh, thank you so much. We do have great conversations. And today we're actually talking about parental anxiety and how our anxiety can affect our kiddos. But before we get started there, got to show you. I'm so excited. So if you've been listening or watching the show much, this is my Roman is Bigger book, right? Yes. Yep, and you've got it in your background right there on your desk. Thank you. So glad you have that. But so here, and then, hey, another Roman book is out. Just came out. Ta-da! So Roman gets to be a bigger brother. His little brother Nico comes into the situation and he's worried, like, is mommy still going to read stories? Is daddy still going to play soccer? Will they still love me? And then, are babies fun? Are they not? And he actually learns that babies are both. That sometimes they're fun and sometimes they're hard. And that's just kind of life, isn't it?
I know. Way to go for him, though.
Yep.
Yay.
And then also, so I have two books that came out literally at the same week. It just worked out that way. So Oscar's True Friends is about a fish, and he's helping the other fish in the ocean there, in the sunlight zone, to understand that they are wonderful just the way they are. And it's our differences that make us stronger and a better community. We don't have to be all the same. In fact, we don't want to be all the same. We need the diversity that's in us. So anyway. And it's available on all the usual places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Good Books, all those things. Okay, let's jump in. Yes. So adult anxiety, we talk a lot about our kids and worrying about their anxiety and how they're doing, but we exhibit a fair amount of anxiety ourselves. In fact, some of us, that may be part of our makeup, and part of our struggle is we may have some kind of a thing going on where panic attacks or whatever can kick in. But a lot of times we just may be anxious about different things and why we're doing that. And I noticed, and we were talking earlier, how just a couple weeks ago I was at church and just having a conversation with a sweet little mommy. She's got little kids, and she was talking about some different things and ideas that she had. And it was just a normal conversation, but super high energy. She's like super high energy and anxious about a lot of things. And I didn't realize that as we were walking out of the church, and I told my husband, I took a breath. I was like, I had no idea how stressed out I was. Like I was picking up on her energy and her anxieties without even realizing it. And so do you have that happen to you where you think you're going along fine, and then somehow you step away from the situation? It's like, I really was stressed out. With that.
Anxiety is very interesting, especially when most people, when I was going through what I would consider the height of mine, I had no idea. I would have never characterized it as anxiety. I would have told you I was worried, I was fearful, I was afraid. What if this happens? What if that happens? Never once did I associate it with anxiety. I might have felt like tight in my chest or like uncomfortable in my stomach, but I never used the formal definition of anxiety. And it's so interesting because we can pick it up, especially in age of 2025. We pick it up so easily because we have so many other things that are going on. And I often think of ourselves as an antenna. Not only are we expressing ourselves, are we sending out energy, we're also picking it up. That being said, we can pick it up from other people, just like you're passing a plate of cookies. And it's something to really be aware of, because you don't notice it's happening until you get into the car and you're like, "Ooh, what was that? Wow, she was stressed out." and you notice that you're starting to decompress back to your levels. But we absolutely pick it up. And this is just between strangers. So you can completely understand how people, including our children, can pick it up from their parents.
Absolutely. And in fact, so just last week, if you go back and look at that episode, we actually, part of the conversation was on empathic kids, empathic adults, and how you pick up on the emotions of the people who are around you. You know, they say laughter is contagious, right? But so is sadness and sorrow and stress. And you may not be going through the stress, but you're near someone who is. And if you're an empathic person, if you're an empath, you're going to pick up on theirs as well. And so our kids are like that, but adults are like that as well. And so it's really important for us to maybe take a minute, take a breath. It was like when I walked out of the church and it was the cool air, you know, it's that spring cold and just a touch of snow, of spring snow in the air. And that coolness kind of, felt good. And then I could say, oh my goodness, I had no idea how I was really feeling. And you just brought up some of the important symptoms of being anxious. Things like being worried and frightened, and your chest tightens, your heart is pounding more. And sometimes it can even get to the point where you're developing these intrusive thoughts that will come into your mind. The what if, and well, this person's trying to do that, and that person's trying to do that. It's not even near what they're trying to do, but we're putting those intrusive thoughts into our minds and our hearts because of the anxiety that we tend to feel. Maybe we're just an anxious person.
And it can absolutely take on a life of its own. And this is an area where I've spent a massive majority of my adult life, is really understanding our emotions, why we think the way we think, how we're thinking, and then how to shift our thinking. So when we're talking about anxiety, things that we notice are tightness in our chest. Oh my gosh, what if this happens? Well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? And when you do that, not only, especially little ones, have this regulation that we're working to support and help and nurture. Adults, so for example, I could have easily taken what I grew up with. And growing up in environments that were anxious or that people were constantly worried. I had parents who were absolutely loving, and also, thankfully, they still have them. They are, they were very worried and protective, but also, well, be careful of that, be careful of this, be careful of that. And I didn't realize I had become that version of myself and constantly walking around with stress. Now, adding to that, so this isn't just only strictly in homes or only strictly in schools. This happens from our environments. Our environment, as in where we live in 2025, and if you have any idea what a cell phone is, quite literally wires you to be anxious, to be on the lookout for something. And it's not until you really understand your brain, how your brain operates, what's happening. Why do we keep picking up our phone every 5 seconds? Why are we constantly on guard? What are we looking for? We have no idea why we're this way until we start to be the detective of our own thoughts and behaviors. And when we're parents, when we're nurturing children, when we're spending time with children, whether it's a guardian or a caregiver or a teacher, whichever, and we're not trained in the ability to control our emotions and to calm our nervous system, our kids will also pick that up unknowingly. And things a lot of the time parents will ask me is, well, how do I know I'm doing it? It's coming right out your mouth. Well, don't do that. What if this happens? What if that happens? Oh, be careful, be careful. As you're expressing yourself. Yes, if your child is running into the street and you're shouting, be careful after that, very appropriate, completely appropriate. If they're feeding themselves, oh, be careful. Oh, don't spill it. Now, this is an unnecessary situation where you're sending all of this information, all this energy, all this worry, all this fear, all this anxiety to that child. And that child is literally consuming it, picking it up without even knowing it. And then we'll start to mimic and model the behaviors that you're showing them.
Yeah. Another thing that can happen is they hear, be careful. That emotion, they hear it so much that it has no impact on them anymore. That's mom. She's always worried. So when they are running into the street and you're saying, be careful, they're like, whatever, it's mom. Instead of, oh, wait, that's something different. Mom's not usually like that. Or dad, same thing with dads too. But it's interesting to me how our kids will start to, whatever, funny story, weirdo story. And it tells you what an awful child I was. But so when I was 10, my mom was pregnant with twins, which would make 6 kids in our family. Well, there was another one even after that. But okay, so I'm 10 years old. And the twins were big. When they were born, they were 6'13" and 7'3", which is like enormous.
Yeah.
For twins. And they would get in kind of under her, where her lungs are. And so there would be times when, depending on how they were fitting into her womb, that they would pressure her lungs and she wasn't getting the air she needed. And so she would pass out. And then
gosh.
Oh yeah. And then as she's down on the floor, they would move and then she could get the air she needs and she would come to. So
wow.
Now, I want you to look at this. Look at your reaction to that story, right?
Right.
Holy cow, right? This woman drove us around town, but I'll leave that alone. So we would be at a store and she would pass out. We would be, she would be doing something at home or washing dishes or whatever. She'd pass out and go down on the floor. Well, it happened so often for me though. And I knew that she would come too, because she always did. Right? Like, oh, okay, whatever. So you go from that first couple times it happens, oh my gosh, what's going on here? To, it was to the point where when Mrs. Benyon came to the Ralph's grocery store and the manager of the store was like, employees had her picture. If she comes in, someone follows her. You're getting things off the shelf for her because it's bad for business to see a passed out pregnant woman on the ground, right? I think, I'm sure he was doing it out of the kindness of his heart, but I laugh at that. Anyway, we had been grocery shopping and we're at checkout and there was a new employee who didn't know, right? And so she's checking out, doing her thing. And my mom said, oh, I'm going to pass out. Down she goes. And of course, the reaction of this lady is like, oh my gosh, we need to call an ambulance. La, la, la. I'm like, nah, she's okay. She does this all the time. I'm just so used to it that I was like, she'll be fine. She'll come to. Sure enough, just a few seconds later, you could hear her. That's what was her thing. And she'd be okay. And then they loaded the groceries for us and she drove us home. So,
wow.
But it's the same kind of thing when we're constantly anxious and worried and upset about things. And it loses its impact. It loses its power with our kids because it's like, she does this all the time. Or, dad does this all the time.
Completely. You're completely right. Yeah.
So what are some of the things then that we can do? I think first off to even recognize that we're being anxious. Like I was at that church, a couple weeks ago. I had no idea how anxious I was. What are some of the things then, Lenora, that you recommend that we can do to kind of even just recognize our own anxiety?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. And that story is so impactful. I'm telling you, that's going to be with me till the end of time. And how you naturally were like, yeah, she's fine. And there was no elevation because your nervous system was now used to it. And the same thing happens with kids, especially when somebody's constantly harping on them to be careful about something. Then they're now recognized as, oh, it's just them being them, or now they're modeling it. So it can go multiple ways, actually. And what's so interesting is that there are some people and some parents and guardians that have no idea. And what I will do is actually reassure them that it's okay. I'm sorry, the internet's just not helping, or she's just not listening. And I'm like, it's because so many times people are thinking that other people are judging them. And what's really going on is that the parent is often judging themselves on the inside. And yes, we all have an inner critic, But to the point of, oh my God, if he spills it, I'm a bad parent. Or, oh my God, if they're not doing it, they're not listening to me. And that must mean I'm a bad parent. Or if they're not doing this, that must mean this about me. And there are so many times where it can go back to people feeling like they're not doing enough, or that they're not worthy, or that they're not deserving. And it's coming out in a totally different way. And when we do the detective work of really exploring our own emotions, or what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? Oh, it comes back to a feeling. And feelings are just spewing out in so much of worry and so much fear, because people have been through their own experiences, but also taught to be in a, I would probably say, like a pretty continuous hum level and high level of fear. What if this happens? What if that happens? And of course, you could be scrolling and having a very nice feed of flowers, sunshine. They're throwing you an ad that's something scary. Or you're going through your work and everything's going according to plan, and then something pops up on your email. And there's so many times where it catches us off guard. Now we're just in this chronic state of looking for the thing to be wrong.
It's interesting you brought up that word, because it really does become chronic or even addictive. These emotions, we feel like, because I'm so worried about this, that makes me a good mom. Or because I'm so worried about this, somehow I'm going to avert some big danger that I don't even know what that danger is. I don't even know where it is, where it's coming from. I don't even know if it's real, but we're going to avert it because we get almost a justification of ourselves through that. Look, I'm so worried about my kids. Look, I'm so helpful when they forget something. I care so much, and I'm going to make sure they're on the first string of the whatever sports, or they're the middle child on the dance recital, or whatever it is, that we get so anxious over it. Really, it doesn't matter if your child's the middle child or on the very left child in the dance. If they play only part of the game or all of the game, it doesn't matter. But somehow, I don't know, we get that type of validation from that, where it would be so much more effective, so much more productive when we can stop and say, why is this really important to me? Because chances are they're not going to be NFL player. They're not going to be the prima ballerina. There are those who do that, and they have a natural talent that goes on with it. And there are a lot of combinations that happen, but we can't control it all. And will life be okay if they're not the starting quarterback of their peewee football team?
Totally.
If they're not the star, now I can't even think of her name now because I'm old. Clara from Nutcracker, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. If they don't get that main prima role. So, and big sports people. I came from a big sports family. I love sports. I was a cheerleader, and my daughters were cheerleaders. My boy, the whole thing. And I can remember Rocky when she was, she must have been about 6, I think, around there. And she's a little rah-rah cheerleader for her big brother's football team. And so we'd be watching her, and yay, and yelling. And then I look over, and there's Rocky in her little cute cheerleading uniform over picking up bugs that she saw on the track, looking at them and investigating them. And we're like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? But and she went on to cheer in high school, and she was good at it and whatever. But it was just funny that it didn't matter that she wasn't the center cheerleader. She shouldn't have been at that point. She was more worried about the bugs. But it's okay. Like, what's the worst that could happen if my child isn't first string on the basketball team?
Yeah. It's so funny. As you were talking, it made me think of, there's this idea that we have to be like, there's keyboard warriors. You've heard that phrase, like people who are online. Some of us can almost become worry warriors. Like, I have to worry. I have to justify why this is so important to me. And this is where couples can really get into some difficulties, because if your significant other isn't as heightened in their worry as you are, they're upset that this person, why aren't you worried? Because ultimately they're not matching it, and they want that person to be just as worried with them. And really, when they're doing that, that is a bonding connection. You're worried about the same thing. You're in that
Mm-hmm.
space together. Whereas when somebody's not worried with you, they're possibly thinking calmer, but then it goes back to, well, you don't care as much. And then that must mean I care too much, or I'm not enough, or why aren't you doing enough? So it
Yeah.
really starts to get very tangled into our level of worth and our level of value and how we show up in the world. And there are plenty of disagreements and unfortunately separations that have resolved because somebody wasn't on the same literal
Mm-hmm.
availability of being worried all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
really difficult to live not just as yourself being the warrior, but to live with a worrier and somebody who has that level of anxiety or that level of overprotection. Because you don't need to get into a huge argument with your toddler about wearing purple socks to school and a tutu. But there are plenty of people that get into a disagreement about it because what
Yes.
what will people think? You can't wear that. That's not appropriate. And these stories and these things that people are involved in. And we're not saying that it's not important to that person. Is it worth your level of concern? And I often think I've had a great career as a speech pathologist.
Mm.
And one of the things that I did very early in my career is I worked in a trauma one hospital. So trauma,
Wow.
there's different tiers of trauma. So you might have trauma 2, trauma
Right.
3 at hospital units, and trauma 1 is the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And I had that experience as being the speech pathologist in that environment. And to this day, I will literally tell people, especially when they're up and overwhelmed and I'm working to help keep them calm, I'm like, it's okay. We're not in the hospital. This is not a life and death situation. Nobody's performing surgery. Your loved one isn't on the table. It's okay. And
Yeah.
helping them say it, especially in the tones that I choose, I'm not convincing them and saying, you should feel bad and you should come chill out and like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Never say that to somebody. That's not A, my
No.
personality, or B, going to be very helpful. But helping them realize, oh, I can breathe. It's okay. And that they don't have to run in this super high spiral quite
Yeah.
literally brings them out of this intense energy and back down to a much calmer state. And it's just an unfamiliar state because then they're like, okay, well, what if that? Because they're fighting this emotional charge that the emotion wants to keep a life
Mm-hmm.
form. And it really is about learning how to regulate your emotions, learning how to deeply take care of yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, so that you can show up for children. You can show up for your children. And they build that trust with you. They build that nurturing relationship that you both want. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be based on running around with fear and worry. And if I didn't get the right cupcakes,
Exactly. That's so funny. So you've brought it, gosh, so many great points. But one of the key things that came into my mind from what you said is so often when we're that overly worried, and I know we don't mean to do this, but
oh,
we're
yeah.
telling our kids, you're not capable.
Oh, yeah.
I can't trust you to do this the right way, so I have to do it. Oh, yeah, you're not smart enough to do whatever, so this. You're not strong enough to climb that tree or to jump off
Mm-hmm.
that rock or whatever it is. So we can't let you do that because you're not capable. And that's some of the psychological side effects, which is the next thing that I kind of wanted to talk about. But some of the psychological effects that our over anxiety can have on our kids. I mean, we know that it develops or it hurts them. They become anxious themselves, overly anxious themselves. They become afraid to try new things or expand themselves. They see, I guess, more things, if not everything, as an actual threat. Ooh, that's a
Mm-hmm.
threat. Oh, I can't trust this. I can't trust that.
Yeah.
So now their threat perception is unrealistic. I'll put it that way. And it can
Beautifully
even
said.
delay their development
Mm-hmm.
in social, emotional development,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Even academic development, it can threaten all of
Academic
those
and then even
things.
physical, for sure. If you're like, no, sit down, you can't do that.
Yeah, don't climb that tree. Well, they're building their muscles, or
Yeah.
playground equipment, or whatever it is when they're out doing things. Oh, don't do that. We want them in a very controlled. Well, my child plays soccer. Well, that's wonderful. My kids played soccer too, but that's very controlled. It's very, Let them go out and do things on their own. Find some sticks if you have any forested area, or trees or whatever, and make something from that. Make it be something. In fact, it's funny,
sure.
Just yesterday, I was working with my little, spicy guy that I work with a lot at school, and he'd gotten in trouble. He'd gone beyond the boundaries, of safety. You got to bring him back. Well, that's fine. And then someone said, and I think he has a hockey stick or some kind of stick, but I'm worried he's going to hit somebody with that, which he's entirely capable of doing. But when I went up there, it wasn't a hockey stick. It was a branch. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is cool. Where'd you get it? Instead of ripping it away from him and saying, oh, this is cool. Where'd you find this? Over by the tree. Wow. And he's pulling the bark off of this branch as we were talking about his decision to go beyond the boundary, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes helps kids to not have to look at you in the eye, but to have something to doesn't mean they're not listening. It just means they don't want to look at you in the face. But
completely. As
we got talking and I said, so this is a cool branch then, and you're just pulling the bark off? Why are you doing that? I'm curious. And he said, well, I'm going to take it home, and my dad is going to help me make a walking stick.
Aww.
Well, that's a great idea. And so instead of ripping it out or whatever, and so then I said, well, I'd hate for you to lose it, and I'm worried about what if you tripped and fell or whatever. And he could do inappropriate things. That's okay. But instead of me just taking it, I said, why don't I hold on to this, and I'll make sure you have it after school. You can take it home. First I had to find out if he was on the bus that day, but you can take it home, and then you and your dad can work on it. And he looked at me and thought about it. He goes, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll come get it. Okay. So he just handed it to me instead of me saying, you can't have that. So when you trust them, and everyone's so worried about him having a stick. Oh, he might do this. Well, okay. But then how do we handle it in a hyper anxiety way or in a calm down? Because if they're anxious and we come in an anxious way, we're just adding to the anxiousness.
You said that so beautifully, especially because look at that situation. There are two totally different perceptions. One thought they were going to hit somebody else, so she was worried, or whomever was worried that they were going to hit somebody else, and you came in, and rather than going to worried, you went to curiosity.
Yes.
And at no point did he feel like, and you said this so beautifully earlier, when we don't let kids do something, we're communicating in some way, shape, or form, they're not enough. And you came in, and not only did you reinforce that was a great idea, that also, hey, why don't we do this? So that way we can actually get it home to dad, and we could do it in a great way so that you can keep going with this awesome idea.
Exactly. And that's some of the things that I'm trying to teach, not even just parents, but teachers as well, is this approach is going to help our kids become more independent, more self-sufficient, more confident. Because some of the things, they lose confidence with an over-anxious parent. Oh, I can't do this. I can't try. I can't. And it's either because I'm not capable or because I'll get in trouble.
Yeah. I often encourage people to notice their kids' language when they say, I can't do this. And they'll say, I can't do this because I'm no good, or I can't do this because it's too hard. I'll reframe it for them. And then once we accomplish it, or as we're navigating it, I'll say, see, we can do hard things. We can totally do hard things. And oftentimes, especially in today's world, one of the things that I share with parents is because everybody likely at this point has recorded their child's first steps on their phone, or their first walking, or their first steps, their first attempt feeding them, whatever it was. And I'll say, ask mom or dad, or ask so-and-so to show you how you first walked. And I said, I know it might be hard to remember, but at one point you thought that was hard. And look at you now. You've run across the playground. How cool is that? And reminding them that we all started at the very beginning. Nobody knew how to feed ourselves. Nobody knew how to walk right out of the womb. We all started at the beginning, and they just don't have the recollection. They don't have the memory bank that it was hard. Now they're building the vocabulary of, oh, this is too hard. I can't do it. Okay, now let's keep building that vocabulary. This might be hard, but I can do it.
Right. So true. And then I think too, well, I know that we're stifling them with social growth, with their ability to make a friend, with their ability to go up to a stranger and say, the new kid, hey, I'm DJ, what's your name? Yeah. Because, oh, no, we don't know that person. Oh, no. Even when you go walking with your kiddo and they see a dog, oh, they want to pet the dog, right? Do we say, no, 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 that dog could bite you, or no, no, no? Or do we teach them to go to the owner and say, you have a pretty dog. Is it okay if I pet your dog? And they might say, oh, well, this dog doesn't like kids very much. It might not be a good idea. Or they might say, oh, yeah, this is great. You go ahead, go right ahead. But you're giving them now the skills. They're not afraid to use those social skills that hopefully we're giving them to expand their horizons, to be socially confident and apt.
I love it. And to do social things in a safe way and I think, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. They say, do dangerous things. Let your kids do dangerous things in a safe way. Let them go out and explore. And I'm not saying give them their bike and say, see you in 8 hours. I completely understand that.
That's how I grew up.
I know. And I grew up going around the block in Brooklyn, and it was totally fine. And there's some people who aren't comfortable with that, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. How they can do things in an exploratory way, in a problem-solving way, not in a, I can't go outside, or it's not safe to go and talk to a dog or talk to somebody. I just came across a reel, and I was like cheering this reel on. The mom gave the child, I think the child was probably 9, 10, gave the child money to go inside to the store and I think maybe buy an ice cream. And mom sat in the car and she recorded herself. And she's like, there goes my kid. He has to go get himself an ice cream. He has to go talk to a clerk and ask and have that social interaction. And I love that social interaction.
Yeah,
I had a parade in the comment section because that's a great thing. Kids need to be able to know it's safe to talk for themselves. It's safe to speak up. It's safe to be seen because they are enough. And they don't have to worry that they're going to necessarily get in a situation. And if they do, how are we teaching them to navigate?
I know how to do it. Yeah. And that all comes from practice. So that's going to go back to my weekly family meetings that I love to push on people. But that's a great time to actually practice those scenarios. So he's been on my podcast twice now. His name's Jeff Nelligan. His youngest, a year ago, graduated from West Point. And his older 2 boys are military as well. But when they hit about 5 years old, it was like a family tradition thing. He would take them to the mall, give them a $5 bill, and say, I'll be waiting for you right here. Go get change. Yeah. And he said one boy, I think it was his middle son, when he did that with his middle son, and he went into a clerk and he said, can I get change for this $5 bill? And they're like, why do you need change? I don't know. My crazy dad thinks I need to get change for this $5 bill. And was laughing at it. And this clerk, with his sense of humor, gave him $5 in quarters. And they thought, what a great trick this is going to be on dad, Yeah. But he was collaborating then with a clerk, collaborating on a fun idea, a trick, a thing to do. And when he came back, he's just proud as punch. And he's just like, here, and has this little thing of bag, like quarters, a paper bag of quarters. So as early as 5 years old, and like it's control. Dad's here's some places, but even at 5 years old, and his boys at 8 years old, they made their own dentist appointments. They made their own doctor appointments. They had to call. He would give them times that are available, and then think about how lower our anxiety can be, since we're talking about parental anxiety, but how much lower that's going to be when we know our kids know what to do if they get lost in the mall. Our kids know what to do if a friend is trying to get them to do something that they shouldn't do. Yeah. And then they're 100%. Confident, and our anxiety level decreases.
For sure. I love it.
So that's totally cool. And so, so I know we're coming up on time. So let's go ahead, and I could talk to you for hours, but
I know, totally.
And you'll be back. You'll be back. But so let's just finish up with, and I know I've asked you that same question, so I'm not going to ask you again, but I just want to, if you had one little small tip that they can take away today, what would you offer them?
What do you want your children to remember most about you? You want them to remember that you were loving and affectionate, or that you were constantly worried and anxious, that you were supportive and that they were always enough, or that you worried every time they took a breath and that they never felt like they were enough? What do you want to be remembered for as a parent or guardian or teacher?
That's amazing. So embroider that, put it on a pillow. and keep it in your house. That's so great. Lenora, we always have such great conversations. And so I want to thank you for coming back again. And so everyone, we'll be back next week. And until then, let's find joy in parenting. See ya. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of today's episode of Imperfect Heroes. Parenting is truly one of the most rewarding journeys we can take. But let's face it, it can be incredibly challenging, and sometimes we make it harder on ourselves than it needs to be. The good news is that with a little bit of work up front, there are practical steps you can take to bring more peace and joy into your family life. I am passionate to share these strategies and insights with you. If you're ready to step on the path to joyful, effective parenting, I invite you to schedule a family checkup. Just click on the calendar link in the show notes below, schedule a time that works perfectly for you, and let's work together to create a more harmonious and happy environment. And remember, every small step that you take today makes a big difference. So thank you again for joining us, and until next time, let's find joy in parenting.